Hello, I'm Jan. I'm sat here in my garden, which I wrote about for Permaculture Magazine, about the role of permaculture and ornamental gardening. I work as a garden designer, at least part of the time, and I was really interested about where flowers fit in with permaculture design. From my point of view, I think that having things of beauty, particularly just outside your door, really important. This garden I look at out of my kitchen window every single day of the year, and I think it's really important to watch the seasons change, the flowers, watching the bees coming and going, watching the frost on the seed heads. I think all these things are really important in our lives, that connection to nature. So I was looking at how permaculture could help us design gardens that are productive, beautiful and preferably low maintenance. I've got a chronic illness, so my energy levels are very limited, and I specifically spend most of my time experimenting to produce groups of plants that grow well together, that don't require very much maintenance at all. So the border behind me, I planted it up about June last year. This is its second flowering year. To my knowledge, I've weeded it once this year and I cut it back at the start of the year. So after that I just let it go. The weeds come and go, the flowers come and go, and what I've ended up with is a kind of a fairly sustainable matrix of plants that provide me with visual interest, with herbs for cooking, with herbs for herbal tea. Here I've got some chamomile, some rose petals and some clary sage, all of which came from the garden behind me. And I won't be touching this garden again from a maintenance point of view until probably March next year. I'm going to be collecting some seeds from here. I do allow things to flower and set seed, things like my herbs. This is the border. It's mid-September now. It's not as colourful as it was, but there's still plenty going on there, and the bees certainly seem to be finding plenty to still keep feeding at. There's quite a lot of interest. There's still a lot of herbs for picking, and most important of all, I've done very little maintenance to this. Just a quick look at some of the herbs I've got in here. I've got some feverfew, some chives, some clary sage, some parsley here which I've allowed to flower. I'll be collecting seed from this later. There's a rose bush there that I collect rose petals from. There's sage, rosemary. I don't grow things like mints in here because they would just try and take over the absolute world. Bit of a thug that they are. And there's some hyssop down there. The other side of the border I've got marjoram, oregano, and at the back there you can see that little tree is a dwarf morello cherry. It looks fantastic when it's in flower. So far I've managed to pick about a dozen cherries from it so far. It is only in its second year, so I'm quite happy to wait a little bit longer. Those cherries went into some delicious kombucha that I made, so all is not lost. So I'm just showing you a quick sneaky peek of the corona border that I started at the beginning of this year. It's intended to flower late summer and into autumn. I've chosen most of the plants to benefit pollinators. And this is its first year, so there are a few bits and gaps here and there. But mostly it's a riot of colour. I'm hoping that eventually I'll not have to do very much maintenance to this at all. Some bits at the end of the border here, I planted it when I first came here and I've not touched them since. Most of the plants are put in as bare rooted items so that I didn't have to use too much in the way of plastic. So I think if you very carefully choose your plants, do your permaculture observations before you start planting, that it is possible to have a very low maintenance, beautiful permaculture garden.
As an experiment, because we have an orchard here that was planted about 25 years ago, mainly of cider and cooking apples, I thought I would sacrifice a couple of trees to see how they responded to coppice and pollard, and we'll go and see how those have done. So just to test the hypothesis of how an apple tree can respond to coppice or pollard management, I sacrificed this. It's a sweet coppin. Right next to it here is a similar tree with the fruit on. So I pollarded it, as you see here, about 5'6" off the ground, and that is basically so the deer and the sheep can't get to the new growth, because new apple growth is like caviar to deer basically, and I'd either need to fence it if it was coppiced at the ground, or this is air coppicing, if you like, otherwise known as pollarding. And you can see here how quickly this is 1 year's growth of apple. How quickly this has responded, because it's got big roots already, 25 years old. It's got big roots, you know, accessing nutrients all around. There's no tillage, there's no chemicals goes on here. It's all organic, and it's very happy to regrow. So this winter I will now thin out some of these. So some of these whippy things, I'll thin those out, maybe leave 5 or 6 good stems, and you know, they're half an inch in 1 year. So given another couple of years, these will be maybe 3 or 4 inches in diameter, and perfect to lop off and then chop up into lengths for selling as firewood, or they could make them into charcoal, and there you have a source of applewood, firewood. And at the same time, or in the interim years, yes, you've got pollination from the flowers, you've got apples, and as you saw in the other system down there, the new system, I've integrated other vegetables and soft fruits in there as well. So you can actually make incredibly productive systems. And when you integrate them into edges, like boundaries, borders, windbreaks, shelter belts, then you're just adding more functions to them as well. So the thought that you could plant a rootstock in a hedge, or every 5 meters or so, and have these as a, you know, highly productive part of that hedge, good for wildlife, good for local fuel, and for all sorts of other products as well. It's like the sky is the limit really, and many opportunities.
Hey there, I'm Brandy Hall with Shades of Green Permaculture, and I'm here at a tiny urban homestead to show you some of the water, soil, and plant community work that's being done in under 6,000 square feet. So let's walk and talk. So I want to start first by talking a little bit about water. So we have here a 300-gallon cistern. Inside it has a submersible pump, and then that pump runs into a distribution line that feeds a yard hydrant, and that's what we use for all of our irrigation here. The cistern is fed by the downspouts. You can see the leaf eaters on the side of the house. It catches both of the downspouts on the house on this side and feeds it into the tank, and then the tank overflows to a food forest in the front yard. So let's go look at that. So the tank there overflows to a series of rain gardens. On this slope, it starts high on the slope, and then that one fills up and overflows to another one. And within this whole area, we've got, it's toward the end of the season now, so things are starting to go dormant, but we've got American hazelnut, American beautyberry, mulberry, pawpaw, which are kind of on the front there. We have elderberry, edible hostas, ostrich fern, loquat, and a couple of native pollinator trees and shrubs like flame azalea and oak leaf hydrangea. So You can see that this once covered with ivy hillside is now very verdant and full of great soil. And then the tank also, we have the option to direct the water either to this set of rain gardens or another, so that we can distribute the water pretty evenly throughout the landscape. And on that side, it's a little bit sunnier, so let's go look at that. So this is the second rain garden set that overflows from the tank if we move the water this direction. And inside we've got some medicinal plants like boneset and Rosa rugosa, which has an incredible huge rose hip that you can eat in the winter. And then also some Asian persimmon up above, and Chickasaw plum, which is a Native American plum. We've got American persimmon as our overstory, and more loquat, which grows really well in the shade here in Atlanta. So let's keep looking. So we're along some of the sunnier parts of the edge of the yard here. So we've got some fruits such as muscadine and nanking cherry, and some edible perennial vegetables such as horseradish and sochan, an espaliered apple tree. So that's a great technique for working with fruit-bearing trees, but in smaller spaces. You know, it's the end of the season, but some leftover herbs as we begin to transition this space to a fall garden. And then more potted fruit trees. This is the biggest piece of sun right here. So we've got a few figs and some more sun-loving herbs along the foundation of the house.